With a flag in hand and a tall cup of melon soda in the other, Ainzul Gaon, the supreme overlord of the great tomb of Nazarick and sovereign of the, reportedly, burgeoning sorceress kingdom, sat in the shade of his VIP booth in the 6th floor's arena. They were between matches early in the Nazarick Grand Tournament, and denizens from across the tomb had come to spectate the event. How did it come to this? His gaze drifted over the buzzing crowd. Not 3 weeks ago, he suggested combat readiness drills for the NPCs. They seemed confused at first, perhaps even worried that he had seen any number of shortfalls in the quality of Nazarick's defenders, so he offhandedly added that he wanted to see the results of their training over the past few years. From there, what was meant as a simple exercise for the sake of the NPCs, who had next to no real PvP experience, transformed into a grand demonstration for the master of the Great Tomb that spared no expense. "In summer. How about another hot dog?" Tokitsu called up to him from below the pavilion. To promote the atmosphere surrounding the festivities, Nazarick's head chef had gotten the blacksmith to create a hot dog cart, complete with a red and white parasol. It was a piece of cosmetic furniture from a book in the library, but it seemed to function just fine as the real thing. Ainz wasn't sure if it was because Yggdrasil's art team was simply that obsessed with detail or whether it was a phenomenon related to Nazarick's translation from the game. Ainz looked beside him to where Mare was seated. "How about it, Mare?" he asked. "Would you like another one?" The dark elf boy smiled up at him in response with a flush on his cheeks. "I'll always want Ainz Summer's hot dog," he said shyly. "Bukabaku Shagama-san." Ainz glanced furtively at his surroundings, but he couldn't make out anything beyond the cheerful faces of those nearby. Mare was designed that way. That had to be the case. It wasn't as if the way he saw Mare was like that. He leaned forward over the railing and held up a bony finger. "We'll have one more. One Nazarick Supreme Frankfurter, coming right up," the Bork boisterously announced. He sat back down and handed Mare his soda. The boy greedily sucked on the straw with his full, glossy lips. Ainz ripped his gaze away from the sight and cleared his throat. "So," he said, "who's in the next match?" "Nabril and Lupus Regina, Ainz Summer." "Ah, the first big match of the tournament." It was the first day of the tournament and, thus far, the matches were appetizers that involved the few mercenary NPCs still active around the base. The display was, quite frankly, disappointing. Each match was about what one would expect from a fight between two mercenary NPCs in Yggdrasil. They easily overpowered any of the world's natives that Nazarick had come across so far, but would be laughably simple for a high-level player to defeat. Of course, they would be able to overwhelm a single player through sheer numbers, but he couldn't say that he was getting his money's worth when he considered the insane volume of materials that had to be put through the exchange box to pay for just one of them. Nabril and Lupus Regina, on the other hand, were guild-based NPCs who had not only demonstrated the ability to learn and adopt new tactics, but also spent plenty of time outside of Nazarick. The both of them had been active since their arrival, so he looked forward to what they had come up with. A homunculus maid arrived with the hot dog on a sparkling silver platter. For the second time, he was tempted to tell her that it wasn't supposed to be presented like that, but he didn't have the heart to in the face of her unspeakably pleased expression. "How do you think the match will play out, Mare?" "Nabril will win." "You think so? Why is that?" "Because she has a lot of experience. She must have learned so much from Ainz Summer while you were adventuring together." Is that so?" It was an unexpected answer, one that he wasn't sure amounted to anything. The only thing he actively tried to improve when it came to Nabril was her sharp tongue. "Wouldn't that mean she has an overwhelming advantage if you factor in their level difference?" Ainz asked. "Lupus Regina has a better optimized build, so they're pretty close in terms of their effective combat power." Ainz nodded, somewhat pleased with the response. An important part of Mare's work with the Adventurer Guild was understanding the job class builds and figuring out how to make them work with the adventurers. That knowledge, of course, could also be applied to Nazarick's denizens. A set of especially raucous cheers, which sounded more like excited screams, sounded from the homunculus maids as Nabril and Lupus Regina took to the field from opposite sides of the arena. Ainz eyed the two contestants, trying to figure out how their fight would play out. "I believe that Nabril is at a major tactical disadvantage," Ainz said. She can take flight to keep Lupus Regina from entering melee range, but the fact remains that Nabril is a highly specialized elementalist. As a cleric, Lupus Regina can handily counter what she can bring to bear. Nabril was optimized for lighting-type spells. So long as Lupus Regina cast the appropriate defensive enchantments, she would run Nabril out of mana with plenty of leeway. From the outset, it felt like it was Lupus Regina's fight to lose. That's true, Mare frowned slightly, then brightened again. But I trust that Nabril's experience with Iron Summer will win the day. Why ye? The crowd calmed slightly as Aura hopped down onto the field with a loudspeaker in hand. It's time for this morning's main event. Her voice echoed off of the stands. In the black corner, we have everyone's favorite cool beauty, the third sister of the Pleiades, Nabril Gamma. Nabril ne Summer. Nabril ne Summer. The homunculus maids exploded into excited squealing again. Nabril's pristine features didn't shift in the slightest. I can't say she doesn't live up to the promotion, but how is she going to win? Ain's gold gown did not know defeat. According to Mare, this included by proxy using knowledge he couldn't recall ever sharing. In the red corner, we have the second sister of the Pleiades, Lupus Regina Beta. Hey! Lupus Regina shouted over the cheers, what happened to the rest of my introduction, Sue? I'm not reading that, Aura told her. There are children present. Lupus Regina is always so mild-mannered. What could she have possibly written as her introduction? Will Nabril stomp her opponent's face into the dirt? Will Lupus Regina be able to maintain her dignity as the older sister? We shall soon see. Why does that sound so ominous, Sue? I sense favoritism, Sue. Are you accusing the referee of taking sides? Nabril asked. Lupus Regina's golden gaze flickered to Aura for a split second. No. With the potential complaint settled, Aura leapt back onto the edge of the stands. She sent a pointed look in his direction. This is my part. Ain set down his flag and picked up a small rubber mallet. Lupus Regina. Nabril. I look forward to your performance. Show us how the might of Nazarick has evolved. He struck the gong next to his throne, signaling the start of the match. The two battle maids immediately started casting their spells. Fly. Protection energy, electricity. Protection energy, fire. Resistance. Protection energy, negative. Penetrate up. Reinforce armor. Minor dexterity. Shield wall. Ain's nodded along as the two battle maids enchanted themselves with the appropriate countermeasures against each other's builds. Lupus Regina couldn't fly, nor did she have any flight items, so both had correctly discerned that the match would become a magic duel. On the back of Nabril's shield wall, Lupus Regina launched her first attack, Flame Strike. A pillar of flame streaked down from the sky, or, rather, the ceiling, and enveloped the war wizard. The flames dispersed a moment later, revealing Nabril, who was gritting her teeth in discomfort. Flame Strike was half fire and half divine damage, so Nabril's defensive enchantment against fire damage could only absorb half of the spell. Lupus Regina's only other spell damage options against the living were purely fire or negative energy, so the 5th tier Flame Strike ended up being her most efficient option. It looks like she took some damage, Mare said. Still, Ain's mused, that's some very expensive damage. Lupus Regina is effectively spending double the mana for the damage, no, less than that, since Nabril will evade at least a few of the attacks. Nabril's in an even worse situation, right? Mare said. She has some backup spells to use against resistant enemies, but they're not good enough to get past Lupus Regina's healing. She can evade those spells, as well. Once both of them run out of mana, Lupus Regina will be able to beat Nabril in melee. Indeed. The matches were listed a week in advance, so I'm curious to see what preparations Nabril has made to overcome this challenge. While Nabril's magical offense was potent for her level, her set of backup damage spells didn't benefit from her elemental specialization. She had lightning attacks that partially bypassed resistances, but Lupus Regina's defensive spells absorbed a set amount of damage rather than resisting it. In terms of damage per mana, Protection Energy beat out spells of the element it warded against by 2 to 1, so it was effectively a hard counter against single-element casters like Nabril. Mare put on a distressed look as Nabril was pummeled by another Flame Strike. MMH, this is hard, he said. I wonder what Ain Summer taught her that will win this. He could only pray that this Ain's Samar fellow was such a genius he could ignore mechanical limitations. Lupus Regina sighed as she rested her mace over her shoulder. You are making your Oni-chan sad. This fight is far from over, Nabrul replied. Being stubborn isn't good, Sue. Why not just throw in the towel, Na-chan? In response, Nabrul produced a slender object from her inventory. Ainz leaned forward, trying to make out what it was. A wand? If so. Nabrul pointed the object directly at Lupus Regina. The werewolf cleric frowned when nothing happened. Is it broken? Na-chan, did you get scammed by a merchant in Irantal? A merchant? Come to think of it, I don't recognize that skin from Yggdrasil. Even the simplest of wands in Yggdrasil had a fantasy-ish look, but the one in Nabrul's hand looked like nothing more than a sanded fescue with no particle effects. Around the arena, the spectators looked at one another in confusion. More than a few of them made disparaging comments about the seemingly faulty artifice on display. Poor Nabrul Summer, how could they do something like this to her? If those filthy humans cheated her, we should level a few dozen villages to teach them a lesson. No, villages take materials to build. We should flay 10,000 humans and use their skins to hang them from Irantal's walls as a warning. The humans will spawn more of themselves in no time. Below on the field, Lupus Regina planted the head of her mace on the ground, continuing to watch her younger sister point the stick of wood at her. Hey, Na-chan, Lupus Regina said, if your strategy got messed up by this, we can have a remel. Ainz tilted his head. What was th-ahu? Once again, Lupus Regina jerked mid-sentence. Ainz stood and placed his hands on the railing, trying to figure out what was going on. Protection energy, Eliway. Protect deep. Protoa. The cleric's attempts at casting a spell were interrupted with each wave of Nabrul's wand as the doppelganger conducted the werewolf through an awkward-looking dance. Eventually, Lupus Regina regained control of herself, probably by silent casting the spell she had been trying to get on herself since the odd occurrences started. It sounded like she was trying to get her protection energy, electricity back up again, so the wand has a lightning-type spell? I wonder how many charges Nabrul used. Albert and the other mages in Ainzulgaon saved mana for boss fights by using wands during dungeon clears, but they always complained about the cost of doing so. Of course, it was unlikely that the wand Nabrul wielded was anywhere near as expensive as those required to clear high-level content at a decent pace. Even so, several things had piqued Ainz's interest. Not only is the wand plain-looking, but the spell it's casting has no visual or audio effect. I can't recall any offensive lightning spells that didn't have those. Aside from the spells that dealt sonic damage, the ever-popular Evocation School was all about flashy effects in Yggdrasil. Even the humble magic arrow caught the eye. Indeed, many considered this a drawback in PvP, as it would announce the presence of a mage to everyone in the vicinity, drawing would-be gankers from kilometers away. This was something that had gotten Ainz killed several times in his lonely days as a newbie. Mayor, he asked, would you happen to know what spell is on that wand? Sorry, Ainz Summer. Mayor looked down at the floor as if he had committed some great blunder. All I can tell is that it's a lighting-type spell. Ainz placed his bony hand on Mayor's head. Ma, don't be so hard on yourself. Everyone is here to show off the new things that they've learned, so it wouldn't be strange if they discovered something previously unknown to us. Out on the field, Nabrul continued waving her wand at Lupus Regina. The cleric refreshed her protection energy, electricity spell again, this time before it was used up. You may be saving yourself some mana, Lupus Regina called up to her sister, but that puny thing won't last much longer. It barely even tickles Sue. As if on cue, Nabrul's wand waving stopped. Lupus Regina smiled as the doppelganger examined the stick of wood with a frown. Then, the werewolf's frown joined her sister's as Nabrul produced 2 more wands from her inventory. Wait, Lupus Regina said, how many of those things do you harbor? Hi. The cleric jerked twice, as if shocked by jolts of electricity. Above her, Nabrul played both wands like a pair of drumsticks. Ref. Lupus Regina called out once she silent cast her defensive shield again, this is dirty Sue. This can't be legal Sue. She's using the power of money Sue. The wand stopped moving. Every gaze went to Aura, who was watching the fight intently from the nearest railing. What are you saying? Nabrul replied in imperious tones. These are ones I bought using the money I earned together with Moments RN. How can such a thing be dirty? Aura raised a hand as she made her judgment call. Aloud. You damn while here. I see. Mare said brightly, so this is Nobril learned from Iron Summer. If you're going to have trouble with the fight, just use cash shop items. Ainz tightly clutched the railing in front of him to keep himself from hiding his face in his hands. The wave of mortification washing over him was subsequently cancelled out by his emotional suppression. Well, it wasn't as if Nishikinrai was a part of the No Cash Shop Alliance. In fact, he was the exact opposite. Like father, like daughter, I suppose. It may have been a point of gamer pride back in Yggdrasil, but there was no reason not to use every advantage available now that they were in a real world. Not doing so would be foolish to the extreme, though, at the same time, he hoped that the NPCs wouldn't indulge in frivolous excess. Lupus Regina stubbornly cast another defensive spell, determined to outlast Nabril's assault. 11 ones later, the cleric was twitching on the ground. Stop! It's going to come out soon. Yeah. Nabril floated to the ground, warily eyeing her incapacitated sister. Hee. Lupus Regina panted, this might become a bad habit. The corner of the doppelganger's lip curled in disgust, then she gave her sister a good stomp. Aura hopped down from her perch. Winner, Nobril Gamma. A great cheer erupted from the crowd. Ainz nodded in satisfaction. As he had intended, well, maybe not exactly as intended, it was likely a good learning experience for Nazarik's denizens. He applauded the fight with everyone for half a minute before raising his voice to speak. Nobril. Lupus Regina. You have both done well. Nobril genuflected on the sand of the arena. Lupus Regina hopped up as if nothing had happened and followed suit. You have our utmost gratitude, Ainz Summer. From this battle, Ainz said, I trust that everyone understands that preparation not only lies in putting what one was gifted with as denizens of Nazarek to optimal use, but also in employing what one has gained over time. If there are other players out there somewhere, they will undoubtedly do the same. Now, would you care to explain the device you employed in the battle, Nobril? As you command, Ainz Summer. The war wizard rose to her feet and raised a wand over her head. This is a locally produced wand which I purchased using the funds earned as a member of Darkness. The most important thing about these wands, however, is the spell that they've been charged with. Ainz said. I've noticed its uncharacteristic traits. Is it a spell unique to this world? It is as you say, Ainz Summer. Your impeccable foresight knows no bounds. Because Ainz Summer graciously allowed me to accompany him as an adventurer, I was able to purchase these wands. Because Ainz Summer shared his knowledge with us, I was able to see an opportunity to improve. Because Ainz Summer founded the Sorceress Kingdom, the mage who produced these items came here to toil for Ainz Summer's sake. Indeed, everything is thanks to Ainz Summer. OHHH. A cheer rose from all around him, one far greater than was lavished on the victorious Nobril. Ainz stood as stiff as a stone, hoping his discomfort at the undue praise would somehow pass for regal reservation. It never ceased to amaze him how the NPCs could somehow attribute everything that went right to him. Ainz Summer. His hand went to his temple. Oriole. This is rare. Oriole Omega was at her usual post in the Cherry Blossom Sanctuary on the 8th floor, overseeing the defense of Nazarek while the other NPCs were spectating the tournament or preparing for their matches. A sense of unease crept through him, but then he reminded himself that a general alarm hadn't been sounded. Forgive me for interrupting your enjoyment of the festivities, Ainz Summer, but we have a disturbance on the upper floors. What sort of disturbance? An outsider is running amok on the 2nd floor. He froze at the unexpected statement. An outsider? On the 2nd floor, no less? Nazarek's defenses weren't fully activated, but a single intruder who could make it to the 2nd floor would be extraordinarily powerful by the standards of the locals. Is the situation under control? Yes, Ainz Summer. She shouldn't be able to get through Shiltir Summer's domain. Actually, she's been trying to leave after meeting with Shiltir Summer. Shiltir was an unfathomable terror from the natives' perspective, so that much was understandable. Well, we can't have that, can we? Keep this outsider running around, I'll be right with you. May looked up at him as he turned to leave. Did something happen, Ainz Summer? Oriole just contacted me about something, Ainz replied. I'll see you at this evening's match. He exited the arena through the nearest teleportation gate. A harsh, dry wind greeted him the moment he appeared upon the barren wasteland of the 8th floor. He took the single, sand-blown path that lay before him, eventually arriving at the entrance of the Cherry Blossom Sanctuary. The area was fixed in a state of perpetual spring, creating a single vibrant location in the middle of the otherwise desolate landscape. Ainz passed under a procession of red Dori as he ascended the hill, his robes sweeping aside the sakura blossoms carpeting the steps. The Cherry Blossom Sanctuary was fashioned in the style of a Japanese shrine from the previous century before Earth's biosphere had collapsed. Coming to the area always filled him with a sense of wonder, and he would wonder why the people of Earth thought such a beautiful thing was worth destroying. Oriole Omega, the last-born of the Pleiades, greeted him at the top of the stairs. The black-haired human was adorned in her red and white Miko outfit, and she cradled the staff of Ainz Ulgan in her hands. Two of the Ukonomitama, Oriole's level 85 mercenary NPC lieutenants, stood on either side of her. As one, they bowed respectfully as Ainz ascended the final step to the sanctuary. "Welcome, Ainz-sama." "Umu. Have there been any new developments?" "There have been plenty, but none appear to threaten Nazarick. This way, please." He was guided to the temple at the end of the courtyard. Inside, several mirrors of remote viewing had been set up to monitor different areas of the guild base. One of them was focused on the arena on the 6th floor. Oriole gestured to a mirror displaying the dark environs of the 2nd floor, which one of her other lieutenants was manipulating to keep track of the intruder, or at least the aftermath of the intruder's passing. Ainz leaned forward, cradling his chin between a thumb and forefinger. "Ho, it appears our guest has anti-divination countermeasures." "Yes, Ainz-sama. We can only track her through direct observation in the rare case that security spots her. Otherwise, we can only follow her through the results of her actions." "Would that explain how the intruder got in?" Security was more relaxed than usual since almost everyone was at the tournament. "Why didn't the Pops detect her?" Ainz asked. "Do we have some type of rogue on our hands?" "A ranger, I believe." "I see. That made a little bit more sense. Unless one of the patrols around Nazarick got very close to them, a ranger would have no problem sneaking through the grasslands surrounding the guild base, and they would leave no trace of their passing." The Ukonomitama manipulating the mirror stopped scanning the catacomb tunnels when she came across a patrol of Nazarick Hold Guarders. Several looked like they had been knocked down by blocks of stone. One by one, they were destroyed by their unseen assailant. "Rocks fell onto them? How can that be?" "The outsider has been setting traps using materials from the guild base, Ainz-sama. She ambushes our patrols once they spring them." "Someone is setting their own traps inside Nazarick?" Was that possible? He wasn't sure if it was. As far as he could recall, no intruder in Yggdrasil had ever bothered trying to set traps inside the guild base. "What's the intruder's objective?" Ainz asked. "Only escape, as far as we know. It looks like she's mapped out most of the teleportation traps on the 2nd floor already, but we've physically blocked the way to the 1st floor with Death Knights. She won't be able to get by them." "What about Shiltir? You mentioned that she's already run into the intruder. I'm surprised she hasn't dealt with her yet." "About that, Shiltir-sama didn't have the heart to chase after her, Ainz-sama." "Huh? Was the intruder so catastrophically ugly that Shiltir was repelled by the sight?" Peroronkino had designed her with a strike zone as vast as the guild treasury, so Ainz found that difficult to imagine. "Still," he said, "an intruder is an intruder. She should have done something about her. I can't imagine Albedo would be very pleased about Shiltir's response. I consulted with both Albedo-sama and Demiurge-sama. They said it was fine to let her do as she pleased. I've taken the opportunity to have her test our defenses." Ainz settled onto a silken cushion in front of the mirror, his initial sense of alarm long faded away. "An experiment, then?" "Yes, Ainz-sama. This one is far more cunning than those gangs of ruffians from the Empire. She's very good at deciphering our defensive schemes and countering them." "Is that so? Well, that's good. Use her as you see fit, by your command, Ainz-sama." He watched as the invisible intruder made her way around the 2nd floor, leaving piles of disintegrating Pops in her wake. It was fortunate that they had someone new to test the upper floor's defenses after the workers' dismal showing. All they ever seemed to do was resort to brute force, then panic when brute force didn't work. She has no problem handling the Nazarick Old Garda patrols, but avoids the Nazarick Master Garda posts. Assuming it's because she can't defeat groups of Master Gardas, that should put her somewhere in the so-called realms of heroes. But did someone like that exist in the region? The equipment available around here tends to make people weaker than they should be. Ines kept himself up to date on the local threat stash, mostly to see if there were any prospective recruits for the Adventurer Guild. There were some with heirlooms that he suspected were odds and ends from Yggdrasil, but there was no one particularly eye-catching. At best, there were a few private individuals in the Empire that Emperor Jerkniv could never manage to entice into his service. Do we know where this person is from? Yes, Ines Summer. Our intelligence on the subject states that her family is from the south. The south? As in the theocracy? That, too, was a possibility. The theocracy was rumored to have far more powerful individuals than anyone else in the region. They even claimed to have many godkin who were descended from what were probably players from the distant past. That was one advantage that Ines would never have, and it concerned him that there might be veritable armies of powerful player descendants just waiting for an excuse to pounce upon hapless newcomers to the world. No, Oriol said, we believe they hail from farther to the south. So we've attracted eyes from powerful interests beyond our awareness? The young woman in the Miko outfit gave him a curious look. I believe that Ines Summer already knows this, but the subject under observation is a human area guardian ruling one of the southern areas in the Sorcerer's Kingdom. In a rare moment of recollection, Ines immediately knew who that was. There could only be one person who matched that description and could also run around the upper floors as they had witnessed. Shiltir Summer invited her over and she just arrived today, Oriol continued. Something happened while she was in the Adipocere chamber. Knowing Shiltir Summer. Damn it, Peroncino-san. Ines released a long sigh. Truly the troubles wrought by those two siblings could reach across worlds. He rose from his seat, wondering how he could salvage the situation, then froze as he glanced at the mirror again. Wait, isn't this place? Yes, it's the junction near his room, Ines Summer. A sense of dread filled his being as he recalled several incidents that had occurred in the Katsa Plains. Things had become dangerous. Is something the matter, Ines Summer? This is bad, he said. We must keep her away from him at all costs. In a dark pit somewhere on the second floor of the Great Tomb of Nazarick, Ludmilla watched as a patrol of undead equipped in golden armor made their way along the walkway above her. They were significantly stronger than the Nazarick Old Gardas, but it wasn't until a few minutes ago that they started leaving their posts to patrol the corridors. She wasn't sure why they had chosen that precise moment to become active, but there was a clear purpose to the movements of the forces in the area. They were keeping her from something. Since Ludmilla was trying to leave the Great Tomb of Nazarick, Lady Shiltir may have commanded her forces to keep her from finding a way out. That, or that they were guarding something else. The latter seemed unlikely since the powerful undead above only came over after she arrived in the vicinity rather than already being in place guarding something important. Now, how do I get in there? As far as she could tell, the undead were preventing access to a door at the end of the section she was in. The area was warmer and had a more living smell to it, so she figured that it was due to air flowing down from the surface. Fighting so many powerful undead at once was out of the question, meaning that she had to either sneak by them, draw them away, or find an alternative escape route. Another skeletal patrol marched by. They were a weaker variety than the ones in the golden armor, suggesting that security was limited. Or maybe unlimited in a limited way was a better way of describing it. Back when she ran to the teleportation spot across the bridge from the Adipocere chamber, it didn't show any signs of activation. Then, some skeletons nearby attacked her, so she had to destroy them. At first, the idea that she was destroying Lady Shiltir's subjects appalled her, but she eventually realized that they kept reappearing. Even the Nazarick Old Gardas rematerialized after roughly 5 minutes, so she was forced to flee and reassess her exit strategy. Any fight that she engaged in bore the risk of dragging on for long enough that other undead nearby would wander close enough to join. The lesser undead that made up most of the population were inconsequential in terms of their combat potential, but anything as strong as a Nazarick Old Garda was a major hindrance. Getting caught by a patrol of the golden armored skeletons would likely result in her being forced back to Lady Shiltir for an unpleasant sexual encounter with her own corpse. Once the next patrol went by and rounded the corner, Ludmilla pulled herself out of the pit to investigate the way ahead. The corridor looked like all the others she had seen so far, with architecture that only vaguely resembled anything in the region on a purely functional level. Occasionally, she would come across what appeared to be words carved into the stone, but they weren't in any script that she recognized. I hope that none of those are signposts or the like. Lady Shaltir didn't seem to be the type to enjoy that sort of humor, but Ludmilla couldn't help but feel that someone was probably amused at her ignorance. Tailing the patrol started leading her away from her target, so she took the nearest familiar route back to her hiding spot. It seemed like she would have to improvise a way past the golden skeletal guards at the door. Aside from the fact that they wore ceremonial-looking plate armor and wielded spears, there was little that she could discern about how they would potentially fight. She couldn't even tell whether they were mindless or not. I have a freedom effect, so they shouldn't be able to restrain me. Could I just rush past them? If they had a taunt, she would end up getting stuck fighting. Or the door could be locked. Whatever she came up with, she needed a way to disengage if she couldn't force her way through. As skeletons, they likely had the same weaknesses and poor physical power relative to other types of undead, but their equipment was a complete mystery. As far as she could tell, they were at least as strong as herself, meaning they were probably higher level than she was. Those levels would mean more skills and abilities that might further add complexities to a fight. Overall, there were far too many unknowns. All she could do was figure things out as she went. Once the next patrol passed, Ludmilla crawled back out of the pit. She unequipped her glaive and pulled out her longbow. The path above the pit had a clear line of sight to the door, so she knocked a blunt stone arrow and loosed it at the golden skeleton on the right. A distant clink sounded as her projectile bounced off of its breastplate, but her target didn't react. I suppose they've been ordered to hold the door. Well, there are ways to deal with that. She put her bow away and went back into the pit to wait for the next patrol. Since her target didn't even bother drawing attention to her presence, it was probably mindless. Her next attempt started with a taunt against the nearest one and it predictably came alone. Ludmilla backed away as it ran towards her, activating Invulnerable Fortress as it came within measure. The shining golden spear stopped against her abdomen. She snatched the haft and wrenched it to the side, bringing her glaive to bear against the strange gap in its nonsensical leg armor. A crushing strike shattered its exposed knee and she swept the skeleton into the pit with its own spear. One down. It was far from destroyed, but it wouldn't be coming out of its makeshift prison anytime soon. Its partner joined it not long after, following a similar sequence. She made it to the door just in time to evade the next patrol. To her relief, it wasn't locked and she slipped inside. She wasn't sure what she expected to find within, but it certainly wasn't anything like what she found before her. The grey stone of the catacombs was replaced by cavernous walls of darker stone. A curious aroma laced the warm, humid air. She didn't see anyone in her immediate vicinity, but, in the distance, a steady, squishing noise amidst the sound of dripping stalactites was growing closer. Ludmilla held her glaive at the ready as a writhing shadow appeared around the nearest corner. "Yes, what is it, hello?" The owner of the rather normal-sounding voice came into view. He was far from normal-looking, however. The source of the writhing shadow was a half-dozen tentacles attached to a body that resembled a stalagmite the same color as the rest of the cavern. A single red eye the size of her head glanced at the blade of her glaive through a slitted pupil before going to her. The tentacles waved lightly around the being. "You must be the new area guardian that Lady Shaltir mentioned." "You know about me?" Ludmilla asked. "Indeed." The answer came through a maw filled with 4 rows of curved fangs. "She mentioned that you would be visiting today, though I did receive a strange message just now." "Is that so?" "Yes, the defense commander on duty ordered me to stay in my area. Something about my life being at risk." Ludmilla lowered the point of her glaive. It wasn't as if she wanted to go around assaulting people. "I apologize for my abrupt and unannounced entry," she said as she unequipped her weapon. "I am Baroness Ludmilla Zaradnik, though I suppose that you are already aware of that." "It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Lady Zaradnik. I am Holniot, area guardian of the Cave of Obscenity." Lord Holniot extended a tentacle. Ludmilla tentatively reached out to grasp it, then suppressed a frown at the squishing noise that it made. Her hand came away with long strands of clear mucus stretching out between them. "Ah, where are my manners?" Lord Holniot said. "Please, come in and make yourself at home." Her host turned around and crawled away somehow with its legless base, leaving a trail of slime that Ludmilla stepped around as she was led deeper into the cavern. Mosses and fungi illuminated the surroundings, reminding her of the other underground areas of the Sorceress Kingdom. Lord Holnut gestured for her to be seated at a table carved out of a stalagmite beside a small pool. "Would you like some tea, Lady Zaradnik?" "That would be wonderful. Thank you, Lord Holnut." Ludmilla watched the glowing fish in the water swim about as she waited for Lord Holnut to return, wondering if they, too, were caught and delivered to the royal treasury to contribute to Nazaric's operations. If she ignored that one part, it at least felt like there was an understandable economy in the Great Tomb. She hadn't noticed anything like money lying around yet, so how people facilitated transactions for goods and services was still a mystery. I suppose if the majority of the population is undead, then there would hardly be any need for a domestic economy. Lady Shiltier's initially confusing common sense should have been a hint. She was undoubtedly a generous liege within the bounds of that common sense, but it revolved around field service and how things should be. It displayed little in the way of the resource-centric thinking that dominated the human nations in the region. Even the Sorcerer King's living vassals, from the maids to the ministers, showed none of the scarcity-induced drive that was considered normal to most. Any activity that resembled it was purely a form of service to the Sorcerer King. "Apologies for the wait." Lord Holnut appeared from behind a nearby stalagmite. "I took the liberty of preparing some biscuits, as well." "Please don't inconvenience yourself for my sake, my lord," Ludmilla replied. "I have willingly imposed myself on you, after all." "It's no imposition at all." A set of tentacles simultaneously put down the tea set, set out a pair of cups, poured tea, and presented her with a plate of biscuits. "I am positively ecstatic that you decided to come and pay me a visit. I feel that we have much to discuss. It would be my pleasure to keep you company." Lord Holnut settled down across the table from Ludmilla, his tentacles waving placidly in what was probably a pleased expression. She held his gaze, noting a vague reflection of her figure in his huge eye. "Very good," he chortled in delight, "very good. I haven't enjoyed the company of the fairer sex in such a long time. Lady Shiltier only tends to come around to make sure everything is operating nominally. I've also found that she tends to prioritize her duties above all else." Ludmilla nodded. "Not that it's a bad thing." "I'm glad that you think so. Honestly, many of us had our misgivings when we heard that outsiders were being considered for the position of area guardian. You all seem to be so different from us, wrapped up in selfish ambition and strange modes of thought." "I had a sense that this was the case," Ludmilla nodded. "My discussions with Lady Shiltier and her handmaidens made it very clear that we live in different worlds, so to speak. Still, I find many things about our liege admirable and worthy of emulation. I still have many questions as a relatively new vassal, however." Lord Holnut shifted forward slightly, his tentacles waving about energetically. "Please, do ask. As an area guardian, you are my very first junior, so I will endeavor to assist you in any way that I can." "In that case," Ludmilla said, "I'd first like to know what an area guardian is. My current understanding is that it is something like the military governor of a territory." Holnut rubbed his non-existent chin with a tentacle. "That is a pretty good way to put it. For instance, the Cave of Obscenity, which comprises roughly a tenth of the second floor, is my area. I am charged with both its defense and management within a set of assigned parameters." "What is the goal of maintaining those parameters?" "Aside from ensuring the area's defensive readiness, I tend to the various resources produced here. Those resources are delivered to the Guild Treasury, where they help shoulder the costs of Nazaric's operations." "Guild Treasury?" Ludmilla furrowed her brow. "Not the Royal Treasury?" Forgive me, I misspoke. How does the Treasury utilize your contributions? I'm afraid I don't know beyond the fact that it does. The Treasurer personally handles that end of things." Once again, the vague role of Nazaric's treasurer set off various alarms in her head. It was difficult to imagine the austere Prime Minister allowing the existence of such an opaque process, but every organization has its quirks and weaknesses. Adhering to the way things should be was a common state of mind amongst the Sorcerer King's vassals, so the treasurer's activities were potentially a point of failure that everyone simply accepted as normal. "Do you know if the contributions of my area undergo a similar process?" Ludmilla asked. "They should if they're material contributions like ours," Lord Holnut answered. but I've heard that the surface territories may also pay in coin as well. In that case, there may be a different procedure. How valuable are the resources produced in your territory? I'm not sure. Then, do you at least know what everything is? I'm no crafter, but... One of Lord Holney's tentacles snaked into the pond next to them. It returned wrapped around a glowing blue fish roughly the size of Ludmilla's forearm. This is a Niflheim night carp. It is a 6th-tier fish. A 6th-tier fish? Yes, it can be processed into materials for 6th-tier goods. Food, potions, etc. I believe it can be rendered into an oil used in metalworking, as well. I wonder if Warden's Vale has any 6th-tier fish. Probably not. The administration used tiers to categorize various raw materials harvested from her territory, but Ludmilla hadn't considered food items in the same light. In hindsight, she probably should have. A mature buck yielded a 1st-tier hide, which could be processed into 1st-tier leather. Its antlers and some of its organs were considered 1st-tier alchemical materials. By that logic, its meat probably also counted as a 1st-tier good. What's the difference between 6th-tier food and 1st-tier food? Ludmilla asked. Oh, plenty. The tentacle released the fish back into the pond. Recipes that use 6th-tier materials are vastly superior to a 1st-tier product. 1st-tier food, by and large, only satiates hunger. Not only does the quality of the food improve as the skill of the cook and the quality of their materials improve, but the meals themselves will provide enhancements upon being consumed. Do you have any examples of these effects? They can make one stronger or give them special properties like regeneration and elemental resistance. Other effects include underwater breathing, levitation, replenishing stamina, and cleansing negative status effects. The potential benefits of well-prepared food are too long to list, to be honest. People lavished praise upon excellent food as if it were magical, but, as far as she knew, no one ever attributed real magical effects to food. Then again, some legends involved eating hearts of powerful magic beasts to gain their powers or finding mystical fruits for a similar purpose. As far as present-day realities went, however, meat from magical beasts and the like was only considered superior, and prohibitively expensive, fare reserved for the tables of the elite. In other words, it just tasted better. How long do these benefits last? They are temporary, of course. The precise duration depends on the recipe and the skill of the cook. My lord, do you know any cooks who might be willing to share what they know about preparing these special recipes? I'm not certain where you'll be going on your visit here, Lord Holneyate replied, but Shiatsu Tokitsu, the head chef, is always on the lookout for fresh and new materials for his art. I'd wager he'd be amenable to sharing his knowledge if you offer something interesting in exchange. Thank you for letting me know, I'll be sure to do that. She didn't know what she could offer in exchange for the knowledge of magical cuisine, but she had to at least make the effort. It could provide an undeniable edge to her subjects and would likely also serve as the foundation for a new culinary branch in her academy. Now, Lord Holneyate said, I would like to ask a question, if I may. Of course, my lord, Ludmilla replied. I will answer to the best of my ability. Ah, it's not one of those types of questions. I was just wondering what your area was like. I've heard rumors, but some of them are so fantastical that they're difficult to believe. Fantastical? Her territory? Ludmilla wondered what they were saying about it. They say that your area is vast beyond imagining, Lord Holneyate continued. That, even if nothing was blocking the way, one couldn't see the other end of it. Is that true? Ludmilla glanced at their surroundings. She supposed that to someone who lived in a modest grotto, her fief would seem indescribably huge. Yes, it's true, Ludmilla said. Originally, I had a single large barony of roughly 1,000 square kilometers, but the advent of the Sorceress Kingdom has allowed me to expand my holdings to over 30 times their original size. To be fair, it's almost entirely undeveloped wilderness populated by demi-human tribes. Lord Holneyate's fanged maw fell open and his tentacles froze in place. 30, gem. That's, quite expansive. Whatever do you do with it all? Less than 5% of the total area is slated for conventional development, Ludmilla replied. The rest is left wild and gleaned for its natural bounty. Is that so? I can't imagine the magnitude of your contributions to Nazarick. It's probably not as outrageous as you may think. The vast majority of the raw materials produced in my territory are only first tier, and only a small percentage of it is taxed in trade. First tier, you say? In such a vast area? We occasionally produce second-tier materials, Ludmilla added, but most of the Sorceress Kingdom is a mundane place. Various efforts are being made to improve things, but it's still a distant objective. The tentacles in front of her resumed their gentle waving. I see. For a moment, I thought you had outstripped us all in your tribute to our Supreme Overlord. You must forgive me for my bout of irrational silliness. I had many conversations that followed a similar vein early in my relationship with Lady Shaltir, Ludmilla said. While I am naturally proud of my territory, I can't say it can offer anything remotely as valuable as yours. To that end, I'd like to know what your territorial development policies are like. It felt a bit silly asking such a question when the territory in question was a cave, but the answer could potentially offer novel insights that would help with her efforts in Warden's Vale. Up until recently, Lord Holnett said, there was no development. It was mostly still as you see right now. However, Lord Ines started encouraging us to explore potential improvements to our respective areas in order to strengthen Nazarick. I've tried a few things here and there, but the 6th floor is where most of the progress has been made. They say that it's because it's the part of Nazarick that's most compatible with the environs of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. Are there limitations to these new initiatives? Oh, but of course. None of our activities are permitted to upset the complex balance fashioned by the Supreme Beings. As a whole, the Great Tomb of Nazarick is a realm that can sustain itself in perpetuity. Does that mean my development plans are in line with His Majesty's will? What does that mean for everyone else? The central administration did little to regulate development throughout the Sorceress Kingdom, giving local leaders free rein in their respective territories. Compared to places that could produce 6th-tier fish, the Duchy of Iranthal was probably an insignificant economic factor in the grand scheme of things. Everything may have just been an experiment with expenses that were considered trivial by the royal court. I'm trying to achieve something similar myself, Ludmilla said. Many of my peers question whether it's the right thing to do, however. Lord Holnett scoffed. Don't let them get to you, he said. It's your area, after all. They have no more say in its inner workings than I do in the affairs of my fellow area guardians. Not even the Guardian Overseer is allowed to interfere unless something has gone terribly wrong. That is reassuring to hear, my lord, Ludmilla said. If you'd like, you're more than welcome to come and visit my territory. I could even locate a cave that you could vacation in or use for experimentation. A pair of tentacles reached across the table to grasp her by the shoulders. Is that truly all right, my dear? I'm hesitant to take you up on such a generous offer without offering something in return. You wouldn't be the only one who has done so, Ludmilla replied. More than a few of His Majesty's vassals are in my territory doing things. Lord Mayor is trying to propagate a new ecology. Lord Cocytus has sent some of his lizardmen to establish a colony. Lady Epsilon is building something deep underwater, Lady Delta is helping out with ranger training, and Lady Zeta, well, I guess she just comes over to eat. Everyone is using the place to help improve the Sorceress Kingdom in their own way. In that case, I have so many things that I'd love to try with you. But first, I must ask Lord Ines for permission to leave Nazarick. Then. Ludmilla smiled as Lord Holnett performed a sort of dance on the other side of the table, his surprisingly flexible body leaning back and forth as his tentacles waved in the air excitedly. After a full turn, he stopped and the tip of one tentacle went to the side of his head. His maw formed into a frown as time went on, and then he lowered a tentacle and looked towards the entrance of his domain. Is something the matter, my lord? Ludmilla asked. I received another communication from Miss Oriole, Lord Holnett replied. She asked me if I was all right earlier. I said that I was, but now she's contacted me again. When I mentioned that you were in my area, she told me that she was sending help right away. How odd. Ludmilla glanced to the side. Did that mean she was going to be sent back to Lady Shaltir? Maybe there was some way to escape. I know, right? Lord Holnett responded blithely. Anyway, about. The air in the grotto shifted, and the thump of the door against the wall heralded the arrival of Lord Holnett's reinforcements. Have you started yet? How far have you gotten? Don't tell me you're already. Lady Shaltir rushed in, wearing the same robe she had been wearing at the salon. Her crimson eyes glowed in excitement, at least until she took an inventory of the interior. "Welcome, Lady Shiltier." Lord Holneyard bent his conical body in greeting. "We were just wrong." Lord Holneyard blinked. I beg your pardon, my lady?" "Wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. Everything is wrong." Ludmilla exchanged a look with Lord Holneyard. What was she talking about? Was she expecting them to be locked in a desperate struggle? "I'm afraid I don't understand what's wrong, Lady Shiltier," Lord Holneyard said. "Ah, is it because there aren't enough teacups?" "Just a moment. Wrong. For Lord Peroncino's sake, this is the worst hero in the wrong way. Where's your pride as a roper?" Lord Holneyard cringed all the way to the tips of his tentacles. He turned to offer Ludmilla an apologetic look. Lady Shiltier crossed her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. "I'm waiting. I expect to see a hot, dripping mess by the time it are." A dark figure appeared behind Lady Shiltier and silenced her with the chop of a bony hand. "All right," a deep, familiar voice said, "let's not go any further than that." Ludmilla's lips parted breathlessly as she took in the maelstrom of obsidian radiance that was the Sorcerer King. Her knees went weak and she felt herself falling backwards. As the world faded into darkness, the last thing she felt was Lord Holneyard's tentacled embrace.